Alrighty, I think we're ready to get started.
Get started.
Alrighty. So, thank you all for coming here today. My name is Cadet Preston Edwards, and with me I have Cadets Connor Danelson and Cadet Lucas Borini, respectively. So we're cadets from the United States Military Academy at West Point, and today we're kind of reflecting on our SCUDM experience, kind of what we gained, what we learned, what we would have done better, and yeah, so we'll jump right into it.
And we kind of are thinking about this as like an open dialogue. If anyone has questions, Connor is looking at the chat. If you just want to type them in there, or could also just unmute and ask, and then just answer you.
All right. So kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about. So we're going to go into how we first learned about SCUDM and how we got involved, and then kind of our process of starting to work on our project, kind of also talk about like the struggles that we initially encountered. And then we're going to go into like a little brief overview of our project, which can be found on YouTube under the SCUDM YouTube channel. And then we're going to give some kind of feedback and improvements that the judges gave our project. And then we'll kind of reflect on the overall experience. So for getting involved for our math class, we had our instructor for our final math project gave us SCUDM as an option to complete our final math project. And we thought this would be, a great way to get involved with like math modeling and a chance to represent West Point. And we also liked the ability to compete with other teams around the country and the world. And it would kind of give us some solid prompts and data to work off of. And we thought that would be a really good idea.
Right. So basically, in our math class, it's basically a calculus 2 class. The final project is to find a set of data and make a mathematical model of that data using differential equations. And so our teacher gave us the option, you can find your own set of data, or SCUDM, you can enter this competition. You'll have to do the project in less time, so you'll have to work a little harder. But it gives you a prompt to work off of, and then you can also use that for your final project in math. And so again, kind of the opportunity to represent West Point in this competition, as well as just work together. In addition, we also would not be able to get assistance from our instructor, which initially we were not sure of, but it ended up working out. I'm really glad that it did.
Yeah, especially at West Point, kind of additional instruction is a pretty big deal. Like kind of the lines of communication between you and your teachers are usually pretty open, and so kind of not having that ability was kind of a big thought point for us. But I think at the end of the day, we decided like, hey, this is definitely something we want to do. We think it's worth it. The experience we'll get out of it, and hopefully the chance to represent West Point.
Okay, so originally, we were not working on our final prompt. We actually chose prompt number 3, which was Fritz the dog. And basically, it was supposed to be sort of modeling a learning curve for the dog, and how Fritz improved on catching various foods that were thrown at him over time. Did not go as well as we had hoped. We struggled a lot, and some of our assumptions weren't necessary or reasonable, which kind of put our project off track. And so we did not have a differential equation. It was around probably a week and a half into
halfway through.
It was like a week and a half, halfway through. So basically, thankfully, because our instructor had kind of like made our final project in class similar to SCUDM, what she was doing was she would have all of the groups in our class sort of submit a write-up and a code to check in with her. Now we were supposed to do the same, but obviously she couldn't give us feedback. But we submitted that, at which point kind of realized like, oh, we don't have a differential equation for this. We've gone off track a little bit.
Off the rails.
And so what we basically ended up deciding to do was switch from prompt 3 to prompt number 2, which was the infinite punishment. I believe that prompt 3, we could have been successful with prompt 3. We just had the wrong approach from the beginning. And so switching to prompt 2 was definitely the right decision. And I actually found prompt 2 more interesting because I liked how it was based on a actual like scientific study in a scientific journal. I thought that was really interesting. That kind of demonstrated like how we're learning to model things in the real world is what I took from that.
And then for when we started working on prompt 3, we began to work on the final prompt after pursuing the research a little more. And so what we decided to do is we used the basic Lockwood-Volterra model to kind of show the interaction between the aggressors and the punishers in a population. So basically, what the Lockwood-Volterra model is based after is it's the predator-prey. So in the absence of predators, the population of prey will increase, and then interactions with predators will cause the prey population to decrease. And then for predators, in the absence of prey, the population will decrease because there's no prey to feed them and they'll die. But for every interaction with the prey, their population will increase. And so this kind of creates a sinusoidal function and then like a slightly trailing sinusoidal function for the predators. And so we applied this to the punishers and aggressors in a society. So the aggressors being the people that commit crimes or do other things. And then the punishers are the people in society that will take almost justice into their own hands and kind of take action against these aggressors. And so we utilize the basic Lockwood-Volterra model. And then what the prompt basically was asking was to improve upon this and create a new model to show more complex situations. So we did one for a cultural shift and kind of acceptance of the punishing behaviors. So over time, society would become more accepting of this. And so the population of the punishers in a society would increase over time, and the population of the aggressors would decrease over time. And then we also had 2 punisher groups in our final model. So there was a group that was more likely to punish people and a group that was less likely to punish people, be less aggressive
In terms of severity.
in terms of severity of
It was more
punishment.
severe,
Yeah.
less severe.
And so over time, the more severe group actually grew in population while the less severe kind of dwindled out, while the aggressor population also decreased over time. And then
Yeah, I think like kind of our idea kind of throughout this project was that we'd take this, fairly solid, kind of proven model, the Lockwood-Volterra model. And, throughout our project, we would be, making it more complex, compounding upon it, in the beginning, we're just like, all right, let's just see some initial interactions between these punisher and aggressor groups. And like, all right, so, we've seen these behaviors, all right, this is, kind of a simple kind of model. And then, all right, what if there was a shift over time? What if people, in the society decided to change their minds and like, all right, we like these punishers, we like this amount of punishment. This is good. And so we modeled that. And then after that, we're like, all right, well, what if there's competing punisher groups? Like, how does this affect, the group that does the offenses? Like how does this affect them? And then how do the 2 punisher groups interact with one another? So yeah, I think over time, we just wanted to show like kind of how we can take this one model and, provide several different interpretations.
And again, I'm sorry, that cut you off.
Oh, no, you're good.
So again, that was a major part that stuck out to me from prompt number 2 versus prompt number 3 was, so for prompt number 3, we weren't exactly sure what we were modeling and how we were going to model. Whereas we looked at prompt 2 and pretty quickly, right? It takes a little bit of time to understand the sort of language of the scientific study, but once you understand what it's saying, you can pretty clearly understand that the relationship is that of like a predator and prey. So luckily, right, we had learned about all these different kinds of like predator prey models, decay models. We learned about all these things in class. And so taking what we learned in class and applying a basic model to the situation is what made it so helpful. And then I think the most appealing part of the project and Scudem and the prompt and everything is just reiterating and improving upon what you originally have. So it's sort of, you find something that can sort of fit and can kind of make sense. And then you take a look at what your assumptions are and your parameters are, and you think, okay, well, how can I add a variable or a parameter to account for a change over time? Or how can I add something that might account for punishment severity? All these different kinds of things. And so I just think the most interesting part of the project is taking what you have and making it a little bit better and better and better until it more accurately represents the data that you're given.
Another thing that I thought was particularly useful is, so we had pursued prompt number 3 with Fritz the dog for like a week and a half. So we only had limited time left to actually complete the prompt we were doing. So we learned to allocate our time and resources according to our each individual strength.
Right.
Like I was particularly good using Mathematica, which is the math software that we used for our project. So I could
All the coding.
kind of do all the
Right.
coding and make all the graphs and do all the labels. And so that would allow Preston and Lucas.
Right, and then I remember Preston was very good at actually manipulating the equations, sort of coming up with what parameter and what operation might account for some of our different assumptions. And then I found it pretty easy to understand our graphs and sort of to interpret our results and sort of think about, oh, well, this is what our graph and our results say, but is that really realistic, or what assumption kind of throws it off a little bit? So it really, I mean, we definitely bonded over the experience, and we
Okay.
found out what we were good at and what we
Yes.
were not good at.
Trial
'Cause
through fire.
honestly, he's a coding wizard and I am not very good at mathematics. But yeah. Oh, there's someone else joining.
Yeah, and so when we submitted our project, we got some pretty useful feedback from the judges. Judges really appreciated our slides and how we formatted our presentation. They liked our pursuit of the lockable Terra model and kind of how we developed it. And they liked the video, which you can find on Scudam's YouTube page. And then one of the things that they pointed out is that the lockable Terra model, like to apply to an entire society with so many different facets and variables, isn't really like realistic.
Mhm.
You can't encompass the behaviors of an entire society with like a 3-4 variable.
Yeah, that was what was
equation.
very interesting.
Yeah.
So there was one comment in particular that kind of just mentioned that the Locke-Volterra model just itself is pretty flawed, which I didn't realize just from my math class. So I thought that was very interesting, and it kind of got me thinking like, well, like what base model would we have used instead? Like what maybe could we have started with and then improved upon that would have made it more accurate? Because even in our presentation, we kind of talk about how, well, our results say that a society that wants the lowest number of aggressors should punish very severely and all the time. And so you can understand how mathematically that might make sense for the model, because if you have an aggressive population that is reducing based on punishment, more punishment and more severe punishment will have it reduce as low as it possibly can. But if you think about that in a real life situation, if we are giving people 20-year sentences for parking tickets, I'm not sure that's really going to improve a society's functionality.
Yeah, we're gonna have
So-
rid of a lot more problems. Yeah.
And we talk about this in our presentation, right? The model has its limits, right? And there are assumptions that sort of we did not account or we're not able to account for, that sort of throw off the interpretation. But I just wonder if how close we could have gotten it if we had started with another model. I found that very interesting.
And then another thing that they pointed out is for our third model with the 2 different Punisher populations, we didn't fully define the new variable
Yeah.
in our presentation. So, and I kind of hadn't realized because like we had made the presentation, and so we very clearly knew what was, what we did. But you have to be extremely clear when you are explaining this to an audience that does not know what you have done and are trying to understand what you've done. So just being very deliberate in your explanations and being sure to include defined variables when
Right.
possible.
Yeah, I'd say like this is definitely like something like I was having to deal with because we originally had like when you had just an aggressor population and a punisher population, I believe it was like X and Y. But when we added the second group of punishers, I made that one. The two punisher populations were now X and Y, and then the aggressor population was now Z. I remember thinking about like we really should have just like made a variable name that was like a lot more descriptive, and you didn't just something like, because I remember trying to explain this to people in a presentation and saying like, so now you got to make the mental shift of like, now Z is the aggressor population that you'll find decreasing, and now the X and Y are competing. So definitely something we could have worked on was making sure our variables were well defined and like very like more easy to understand.
Right, and it's also just a product of 10 minutes is not a lot of time to sort of define all of your variables and explain all of your parameters and your graphs. That's honestly, that's just a part of Scudem. That's kind of the point, is to make it difficult and sort of you have to be concise and clear. But that was just one little part we struggled with when we had our pretty complicated and advanced model, was making sure that our audience was on the same page as we were, because it made sense to us. We'd been working on it for weeks, but explaining that was where we were kind of lacking.
Yeah, I remember like watching the video again, and I was telling them, I was like, wow, I'm talking really fast in this video.
Right.
Like, yeah, because we have 10 minutes to get all of this stuff down and make sure, you know, we got to get the most important bits at the quickest time possible.
And
so
kind of moving into a reflection on our overall Scudem experience is that it was actually really an amazing experience. And we really appreciated the chance to represent West Point and participate in this international conference. And I guess one of the biggest pieces of advice we would have for future Scudem participants is, if you hit a dead end with a project and you're not making any progress, it's best to just cut your losses and pursue a different prompt, because we didn't fully know that what we were doing was completely wrong and would never give any results. But we kept on pursuing it, and we ended up wasting a decent amount of time that we could have used on a second prompt to go even more in depth or create an even more complex model. And so just knowing when to, I guess, give up and pursue a different prompt is extremely important.
Not exactly giving up.
Not giving up, but
it's
like
just a matter of
another path to take. Yeah,
exactly. And in terms of Scudem, we sort of think that we really liked our prompts, but what kind of might have improved our prompt was that if we had concrete data, because it was based on a scientific study, but it didn't have concrete population sizes. So those were kind of things that were left up to our interpretation. If we sort of had concrete numbers to plug in and incorporate into our graphs and all that, we think that might have made it a little bit clearer. And it would have, I think it just also improves the sort of realism of the model. If you can say, okay, well, this isn't just something like a concept that was observed in a scientific study, like these are the actual group numbers and how those actual numbers changed over time. And so then you can really tell if your model is close or not close at all. There was also, I think that considering we had a pretty decent project that we were able to complete in only about half the time, we think that, you know, it might be beneficial to sort of shorten the length of the Scudem sort of project period. Or it might also be beneficial to increase the project depth, have the different groups go a little deeper into their projects. That could be with more models or maybe with further analysis, anything like that. And then I guess, like, Preston, I don't know, what do you think we would have done differently if we were?
Well, so I think, so definitely what you talked about before, you know, knowing when to take another path. And like, I think just one of our foundational problems is make sure you have an actual model that is already a model. Because I think at least with Fritz the dog prompt, we were trying to make our own differential equation, like completely new model. And like, and with the amount of time we had, like, all right, we shouldn't have done that. We should have identified a prompt where, like, all right, there's already a solid model we can base our project off of. At least with, you know, with prompt 3, we're like, all right, this is clearly a logical Volterra predator prey type situation. All right, and we'll go forward and use that. And like, at least with Fritz the dog, we didn't really know what we were getting into, or like in terms of like developing an actual model. So I'd say that's definitely something we would have done differently.
And I also just think that because you're not allowed to have outside assistance during the project, I think taking advantage of your teacher, your instructor beforehand as much as you can is definitely essential. We definitely talked to our instructor about it, Major Oletti, but I think it would have been beneficial to meet with her a few more times, just to make sure sort of if we sort of had a larger toolbox of differential equations and the situations we can apply them to, I think that would have benefited us. We may have even done Fritz the dog and continued that with the whole project period, or it just would have helped us go deeper into problem number 2.
All right,
So-
and with that, we would like to open the floor to any,
If there's any questions, and
feel free to type in the chat or
or just
unmute and
unmute
ask.
and ask. A pretty conversation environment. Let's see if that works. Okay. Well, I guess if there's no questions,
We can
hang out a
wait for,
little bit longer.
just hang
Okay.
out for a few minutes and then
problem.
wrap it up.
Oh, is there something? in the chat? Oh, thank you. Examples. Nope. I think my Zoom just crashed. Oh, no. Oh, I'm good. Okay.
So yeah, that's about the right time for it to crash right after,
No.
after glad it was not in the
Can't
middle of
believe
our.
that. It just says it's quitting unexpectedly. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it. Hopefully it's fine. I'm still here, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're good. You're good.
Yeah. Is there a screedum for us like in future years, or is it really just, is this our only chance? Like, can we do
I
this
think-
again?
I think, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. You think we're gonna bring this?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
People need to stop. See. Like a few people came in the middle.
Yeah. Grew up to like 11 people. It's pretty cool.
Right, they missed a little bit of the beginning. That's fine.
If there are no further
There's no
questions, yeah,
questions. I got
thank
We can
you
just call
so
it here.
much
Thank
for
you
this
very much.
opportunity to present and represent West Point at Scudem. Yep.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. We
Thank
all,
you.
Have a nice day.
day.